Great. Okay, so this meeting is now being recorded. Thank you all for being here. The topic of our conversation today is going to be the Farm to Institution Market Development Grant. My name is Gina Clitheroe. I'm with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here with Diana Ferguson as well. And Diana's calling in from her phone right now, but just we'll get to a point where Diana will take over the presentation shortly, and she'll have a chance to introduce herself there. All right, I am going to get started here. So we're gonna talk through a brief agenda for this meeting. As a reminder to mute yourself when you're not speaking, and feel free to use the raise hand function if a question comes up as we're working through the slide deck. But you can also just unmute and share, just introduce yourself for the recording. Also feel free to type your question into the chat at any point as they arise for you, and don't worry, it's not distracting. We'll get to it when we can. And again, this session is being recorded. So our objectives for today are going to be to walk through the grant, an overview of the Farm to Institution Market Development Grant Program from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture. We're going to talk a little bit about the program history, and then we'll get into the details of the grant. So we'll talk about eligibility, the different components of the application, what some documentation to note at the application stage and at the awarding stage if your application is funded, a note about matching requirements, and the payment schedule. And then Diana Ferguson is going to take over for a demonstration of web grants, which is the Agricultural Development Division's grant management system. And then we'll have time at the end for more questions and discussion in addition to whatever kind of emerges as we work through the slide deck. So at a high level, the Farm to Institution Market Development Grant is meant to support market development opportunities for local food producers, processors, to support them in selling more local food to schools, colleges, hospitals, nursing homes, and other local institutions. Other examples of local institutions could be corrections facilities or, state cafeterias, and early child care centers. Those are all other local institutions that are all listed in the request for applications. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out as well. Eligible applicants are Vermont farm or food businesses, Vermont producer groups or associations, and supply chain facilitators, such as nonprofits, economic development authorities, and food hubs. That third bullet point is a copy over from another webinar. Ignore that one. But the fourth bullet point is on the amount of funding that is available to award. $30,000 is available for this grant opportunity in total, and the min-max award range is $10,000 to $30,000. Because of this, 1 to 3 grants will be supported. So there might be one $30,000 grant that's selected based on this application process, or there might be between 1 or 2 that fall in the lower range. The application deadline is April 25th, which is a Tuesday at noon. And I did just want to touch on as well a little bit about the history of this program. So this program was formerly called the Local Food Market Development Grant, and was launched in 2011. It's funded annually by the Vermont State Legislature at $30,000 a year. It's a unique program, and it's had the flexibility in the past to support institutional market development or wholesale market development. Welcome, Katrina. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself, thank you so much. So the history of this program is from 2011 to 2021. The grant awards, or 2020, were typically small in the $2,000 to $5,000 range. Several of these grants going to farms, but also some going to nonprofits. Um, and the there's been an ability for farms to use those funds to increase their access to wholesale markets. But this year we are rescoped the program to really focus on the institutional market channel exclusively. With the small funding pot, it made sense for us to be a little more specialized, and in recognition as well that there are other grant programs from the Agency of Agriculture that serve wholesale market access quite well. So if you are a farmer or food producer interested in wholesale market development opportunities, and the local food market development grant was a resource that you looked to in the past. Um, Going forward, would encourage you to look into some of our other grant programs. One of those being the Produce Safety Improvement Grant Program, which can help meet the food safety needs of buyers, or address regulatory changes needed to support complying with the Food Safety Modernization Act. There's also the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, which hosts a business grant opportunity that a lot of producers utilize to increase their sales, whether it's to wholesale market channels or otherwise. So the other change that we made in 2023 was increasing the award minimum to $10,000. So we're no longer looking at funding those micro grants really in the $2,000 to $5,000 range, but looking to support a few higher impact projects. The eligible applicants for this grant opportunity are, again, farmer food businesses, producer groups or associations, and supply chain facilitators. And projects must increase institutional market opportunity for at least one Vermont farm business, increase the amount of local food purchased and served in local institutions, and focus on collaboration, developing new sales relationships or existing sales relationships for institutions serving meals to Vermont residents. The one way that I've been talking about this grant program lately is thinking about this as a nice complement to the other farm to school and early childhood grant programs offered by the Agency of Agriculture. Those grants are typically going towards educators, so schools, early child care centers, after school programs. We actually have two of those grant programs open now. One is the Vision Grant and the other is the CSA grant. This grant is focused on producers and really on the supply side of farm to school in the cafeteria. We know that farm to school is more than just buying local food. It's also, integrating agricultural education into the curriculum, engaging students with their communities. But when it comes to farm to school in the cafeteria and serving local food, this grant program is a nice complement to those other grants that we offer and is really focused on supporting that supply input into farm to school and early childhood. And some things to note is that there are certain things that are not eligible for this project, to fund with this grant funding. Vehicles and land and any funding funding for purchases made prior to award notification, and also funding for projects that promote non-local food products as defined by Act 129 of 2020, which is the current definition of Vermont local. The components of the application that you'll see when you get into our grant management system, Web Grants, which Diana is going to walk us through later. It's a fairly straightforward application. You're asked to provide some information about your organization, the project, and then give some goals, performance measures, and expected outcomes that you can measure the success of your project through a couple of reports going forward. And then a project timeline and budget. So in addition to, getting into the web grant system and responding to the questions in the application, just wanted to flag there are a couple things that you'll need to either attach on the application or submit afterwards if your application is awarded. So in the application itself, all Agency of Agriculture grants are required to submit this good standing certificate from 1 Act 54. And it's a fairly simple attestation that your organization is in compliance with water quality regulations. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out, but it's generally a pretty simple requirement to meet for folks. And then optionally, applicants are welcome to submit letters of support from project partners, such as an institutional buyer. And welcome, Corey. I'm just gonna mute you real quick. And then, so that's within the application. And then when it comes to, if your application is accepted, like I said, you'll be notified of that, and then you'll be asked to submit a couple additional documents. And these are a certificate of insurance listing the Agency of Ag as additional insured, and a current IRS form W-9. These are standard grant requirements for all state grants, but just wanted to flag them here. Something to look closely at as you consider applying and some of the implications of getting funded. There's more information on the request for applications about that as well. And I didn't know, Diana, if you wanted to add anything about any of these required documents. No pressure at all.
I think you covered it, Gina. I think if anyone has any questions about the water quality form, which is new in the past few years, or any of I think the bigger questions come once awarding has happened with the W-9 that, little things like it has to be signed in the past 6 months, and there's a whole set of criteria that apply just to the certificate of insurance and W-9, but we can include that information if and when folks are awarded, but feel free to ask any questions ahead if needed.
Thanks so much, Diana. Just to note that there is a matching requirement for this grant, and that's 25% of the grant request. But that can be in the form of in-kind, cash, or a combination of both. So for example, if you are applying for a $20,000 grant, that'll require $5,000 to be cash or in-kind or a combination. And the payment schedule for this grant, it's a 2-year grant period. The first grant payment claim can be submitted as soon as you submit all the required documentation that we spoke about. You're welcome to set up a direct deposit that can expedite the process, but otherwise checks will just be mailed. And then you sign your grant agreement, and then you can request that 60%. The second claim for payment can be submitted and approved after you submit your first status report, and that will be due in June 2024. And then your final report can be submitted as soon as your project is completed, but the deadline for completing your project is June 30th, 2025, and that's also when your final report needs to be submitted. Once that report's submitted and approved, the final 10% will be released. And just at a high level, these are some of the resources that you can utilize as you prepare an application. You can visit the grant webpage, which still has the local food market development name there. That is the former name of this grant program. And there you'll find the request for applications, which has all the details about the grant. You'll find the link to Web Grants, which is the application portal, and also the grant management system that we use at the Agricultural Development Division. And then you'll also find a link there to the application guide, which walks you through step by step as to how to navigate the grant management system if you get stuck at all. And You will ultimately, all that information is housed on the Agency of Agriculture website, but you'll have to get into the Web Grants portal in order to submit the application. And Diana is going to lead us through a quick demo there. I don't know, Diana, are you at your computer now and able to screen share? Would it be helpful for me to screen share?
I am at my computer, Gina, but I'm having some tech issues. I'm for some reason Microsoft Teams isn't letting me log in. So I'm still trying right now, but if you would be willing to pull up Web Grants and we can start there, and then if I'm able to get through on my side, then you can turn it over.
Will do.
Let me just. I think it's because I changed my network password this morning, so it's kicked me out of everything.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Those days.
Yeah, it's great. Microsoft Teams is so secure, but it's like so secure that I get kicked out all the time. Okay, let's see here. Get into the tester account.
And while Gina's pulling that up, I'll just share, hopefully at least some of you are familiar with the Web Grant system. It's what I call our one-stop shop for grant management. So everything from the application to granting and grant management, status reporting and payment requests. So if you are not familiar with the system, it's great to, once you have your account, log in and just play around with the navigation to get familiar with it. There is definitely a learning curve involved, and at times there can be little glitches. And so it's just helpful to just get familiar as you can, especially if you're awarded, you'll be spending a good amount of time in there. So thanks, Gina, for doing this little workaround. And I'm sorry that I'm not able to be on camera. My Microsoft Teams on my desktop computer is not cooperating at the moment, but I am Diana Ferguson. I am a grants management specialist with the Agency of Agriculture, and I support grant making from sort of back of the house, and the Web Grant system is part of my everyday life. So in the case that you encounter any issues during the application process, please do reach out to me and I would be happy to help. So now with Gina's help, we're going to go through an application, a test application, and we might just abbreviate it for simplicity's sake. This is the login screen. You can see if you haven't registered before, you can click to register. And we do recommend, if you have multiple people from your organization intending to collaborate on the application, that you go ahead and have them all create their own Web Grants account. And once that's done, we can connect multiple folks to the application. If you've already started it, or if you haven't already started the application, then you can add your collaborators on your own when you're starting the application in the system. So Gina's going to go ahead and sign in to our test account. And so what you'll see on the left-hand side are some gray navigation buttons. And if you become a grantee, you'll use many more of those. But I did want to point out my profile first on the very bottom. That's a place where if you're already a user in Web Grants, and for example, maybe some of your contact information or address or anything else has changed, you can click on my profile, and then that will pull up your individual Web Grants profile, and you can use the green edit button to change anything that you need to, which is important so that all the notifications are going to the right place. And you can also reset your password if you'd like to use something that's more memorable than the one that the system provided when you registered. So the first thing you'll do when you're ready to start your application, you've read the RFA, you're ready to go, you've got your ideas in mind, maybe you've even started composing your answers in a Word document, which is what we recommend for ease of use, because
then you're logging in fewer times. But of course, if you would like to compose your answers directly in WebGrants, that's fine. Your first step will be clicking on the Funding Opportunities button, which is right under Dashboard. And then you'll see a list of all of the agencies or our divisions available funding opportunities that are currently accepting applications, which are in green that say posted. And so at that point, you'll select the Farm to Institution Market Development funding opportunity. You can click anywhere there. And then what you'll see is a funding opportunities overview page. So if you scroll down, Gina, everyone can see that this is just a short description of basically a recap of what's in the request for applications, an overview, and you're making sure that you are in the correct funding opportunity before you start your application. And at the very bottom there are some links and attachments that hopefully will be helpful to you if needed, as far as I believe the application guide is there and the request for applications is linked. So just some general overview information. Again, you're making sure you're in the right place. And the first thing that you'll do when you're feeling ready to go is go back up to the top. You'll see we have some test applications already happening, but you won't have anything in that menu. So you'll click the green button that Gina is on to start a new application. At that point, you'll give your application a title or a project title. We're going to create a test title, but it can be whatever short descriptor you'd like of your project. And then you're going to save the form information, which is the green button. This is a 3-step application wizard. So you just completed your first step by creating your project title and saving that. And so it's showing you that that is saved in the system. And now the next step you'll do, even though that box is still available, is confirm that your organization is correct in the drop-down menu that Gina is highlighting. And that's in case some of you work for multiple organizations, you're making sure that the one you're associating with the application is selected, and then you will save form information again at the top right. And then the final step of the 3-step wizard is really only applicable, as I mentioned earlier, if you have multiple folks working on the application, if you have a business advisor or a colleague or friend that's registered in WebGrants and they've been associated with your organization, you'll find their name there. So just select them, and that means you can collaborate on the application together and then save form information. If that doesn't apply to you, of course, you can leave it blank. And what that does is create the backbone or the structure of the application in the system. And there you have under application details, a list of forms and a nice red error message that says you can't submit the application yet, which of course you know because you haven't completed it. But that's just an extra reminder that that red box will turn green when your application is completed and ready to be submitted. So if Jeannie, you could click on that first form, applicant information. This is what a form may look like, what the forms look like that you'll be completing. All the items that you see in red text with an asterisk are required fields. So that means you cannot submit the application until those are all completed. The ones in black text are optional. So what you can do is enter your information in the form, and whenever you're at a stopping place, even if you haven't completed every question in this form, you can click the green Save Form button that appears at the bottom and also at the top of the screen. They do the same thing. So when you've entered some information, click Save Form. If you need to walk away, be sure to save it. You can come back and edit it as many times as you like during the course of the application period, and save and edit and resave. And then when you've completed that particular form that you're working on, you'll see that orange Mark is Complete button on the right. And that's what you click when you're fully done with that one individual form. And that will tell you, that will tell the system that you're finished editing that set of questions. If you have not completed them all, you'll get an error message, which Gina received, that's telling you please go back and make sure that everything's filled out before you mark it as complete. And then as you see on the top, there's a row of blue links, blue words, it looks like, above the applicant information title. Gina, if you can just kind of hover over there. So this is a way that you can navigate in between the application forms. You can go back to the menu we were looking at before and click from one form to another, which is totally fine, but this is just a little shortcut. If you're ready to go to the next form, you can click on the next blue link and that will take you there as well. So we won't go through all the application forms because we know you have plenty of fun ahead of you doing that on your own. But just as a reminder, save the form after every time you need to step away. Mark the form as complete when you're fully done. And once you've done that, when you're back on the menu, Gina, which you can click on, yep, right there, you will have a check mark under the complete. You can see the general information form has already been marked as complete. That's just the system form that's created when you start the application. So it's already complete and you don't need to worry about it. When you've completed each individual form, you'll have a check mark by each one. And when you have check marks all the way down the line, then your application will be in compliance and ready to submit. And you can't see it now, but at that time, you will see an orange submit button pop up right next to the blue preview application button. So sort of toward the middle of the screen. And at that point, when you click submit, when everything is fully done, the application will be changed from editing status to submitted status in the system. You will get a notification on the page that says that you've successfully submitted. You will also get an email from the system confirming that your application has gone through. And at that point, it's turned over to the agency and cannot be re-accessed. If you have an emergency or you forgot to include something or you made a mistake, certainly let us know and we'll see what we can do. But at that point, submitted applications are in our hands and then they go through the review process together after the application deadline has passed. The system will prevent applications from being submitted after the deadline. So if you're encountering any issues, hopefully not at the last minute, but if you encounter any issues leading up to your submission, then please reach out to me and I can pull up your application and see what might be happening. So I think that's the long and short of it as far as starting an application and navigating through it. I do recommend looking at the Web Grants application submission guide, which I believe is linked. It's linked on that first homepage of the funding opportunity, which we visited originally. And I believe it's also linked in the slide deck and on the organization's website as well. If you're looking for farm to institution market development grant information, then how to apply in that section, as Gina is showing us. There's a nice handy application guide. So if you don't feel like watching this presentation again, or you have another person who's going to be working with you on the application, it's certainly quicker and easier to just walk through this step-by-step guide with screenshots to help you along with each step in order to successfully complete and submit. So best of luck to everyone in that endeavor. It definitely takes some time. So please, again, reach out with any assistance that Gina or I could provide in the process. And thanks, Gina, for doing a great job navigating while I'm speaking, since my laptop is not cooperating today.
No worries. No worries. Thank you so much, Diana, for that detailed demonstration. So that concludes our prepared section of this webinar. Does anyone have any questions that you'd like to share now, or general kind of comments on the application or this webinar so far? Katrina.
Thanks. Yeah, the RFA indicates that there's a total of 30,000 in funds, and I was wondering if you are planning on partially funding if there are more awards than there are funds for that you want to fund. And apologies if you covered that in the first few minutes. I know I arrived late.
No, I didn't address that question of partial funding. It's a really good one. I would say in general, we'd rather not partially fund an application just because, you know, if that's whatever, we don't want to give people less resources than they need to do the project that reviewers were excited about. It might be, in some situations, it makes sense. But in general, I think that's not the approach that we'd like to go in. So if, we will fund 1 to 3, and if it ends up just being one application or one grant that gets awarded, but it's a high impact award, then that'll be the route that we go, rather than partially funding multiple applications and jeopardizing the success of those projects. I think that's the general rule of thumb, but there are kind of exceptions to that rule. Yeah, thank you for that question. Any other questions? Okay,
Actually, I do have one more. It's a web grants
please.
question.
Yeah,
In the past, I believe when we've created a project title in order to create an application, that project title cannot be changed later on. Is that the case, or are we, maybe this is a follow-up, I should have with Diana if we have problems with that.
Diana.
That's a great question, Katrina. It does sort of lock you in to your project title because it absorbs that into the general information system form. However, if you feel that your title in sort of the evolution of your application process isn't accurate or you'd like to adjust it, just reach out to me and I should be able to do that on the back end. You could shoot me an email with the new title and I should be able to plug it in there. I haven't actually done that before, but I should be able to. So I know it's kind of frustrating that you have to choose something up front before you've even finished writing the content of your application. So if that happens, then and you're not able to change it on your own, then just be in touch and I can help.
Good question. Okay. Hearing no other burning questions, I will just drop my email into the chat in case you don't have it at your fingertips. Feel free to, and my phone number. Feel free to reach out with any questions that come up over the next couple weeks. Thank you all for being here. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
So.